Hello, FewCandy here, and welcome back to Solitude. And last time out we built this huge outdoor shopping mall area to kind of feed our budget hotel from the Hotels and Retreats DLC. And I think it turned out pretty nice. There's lots and lots of development to do around this area on the outskirts of Serenity, but I think we made a pretty good start. So you would have seen at the end of the last episode that we had major worker demand for our big shopping mall area. So we're going to come in with quite a large residential expansion today. And because this map feels quite Rio de Janeiro, and a lot of you have mentioned that in the comments, I really think it would be appropriate to add a favela in. So that's what we're going to be attempting to do today in the foothills of the mountains. I think it's going to turn out to be a really nice complementary area to our luxury villas on the altitude hillside. And for the style of the map that I want to achieve here, having very obvious class divides I think is a key element of that. Like, we want to have the very obvious rich people's housing, and we also want to have very obvious low income housing areas as well. So we'll be having a few of these I think around Solitude. So we are going to be building the first Solitude favela up over here because I think this is a prime spot for it. Looking at Rio de Janeiro, a lot of the favelas are up steep mountainsides, so we've definitely got that over here. It doesn't have ocean views as well, so kind of saving that for some of the more luxury housing in Solitude. So I feel like it's an appropriate spot overlooking Lucara Farm. So we're going to be doing it in here. So I'm going to start off with bringing out some road networks for this. Now, obviously, we need to be really well aware of the terrain. I'm going to turn off tree anarchy before I forget. So let's keep our terrain lines on as we draw this in. I do have this damaged road asset off the workshop, which I think I'd quite like to use here. So we'll start drawing this out from these road connections that we've got over here. I also do want to bear in mind we probably want to cross the train track somewhere, but I'm thinking likely over here the land is a little bit smoother. Is probably going to be the best place for that. So we'll just feed the roads round the edge of this mountainside here and focus the building up in this steep area that we can see this side. So firstly, starting off with this road connection. So yeah, I'll use the damaged road for now, but we'll probably upgrade certain sections of it because we may not necessarily want it starting from right back here. But what we're going to do is we're going to bring it up quite close to this train track. Now this is raising up in height. We're going to probably need to look at this and use a little bit of move it just to adjust it as we go round. But we'll feed it out and round like this for now and leave it just there. And I can already see that's kind of a little bit bumpy, but I'm going to like how this road is situated against the train track. I think this will be quite nice having this sort of drop down. We'll do a bit of detailing along here. But it's a slightly too sudden change in elevation there for my liking. So we'll just grab move it and we're going to just smooth off these nodes a little bit. So we'll grab slope objects. And that feels a little bit better to me. We can sort out the landscape this side in a second. So we're going to have this one main road that loops around and connects up to this one through the centre of the favela. And then all of the other roads in there are going to be just very narrow concreted alleyways. And there's not going to be too many of them. We're going to really pack the housing into here. Because looking at it on Google Earth, it almost looks like there's no road connections on a lot of it. So yeah, it's quite an interesting setup. I think something like that will be fine. And I mean, looking at it now, we probably don't want this one as the damaged road. So let's just go ahead immediately and change this back to just the regular vanilla road there. We can have the damage going up through the favela like that. So let's start off by just smoothing out some of this landscape here. So I'm going to grab the slope terrain tool. We're going to right click here and we're just going to drag it up from this point. And do a couple of these just to smooth out some of this landscape. We want to combine it with a little bit of the smoothing tool as well. But just so that we don't get that sudden drop off on this side of the road, because that's not really what I want. I want this steep landscape here because we're going to be filling this with houses. And that's absolutely what it is like in Brazil. And just to note as well, there is a very helpful tutorial on the main Cities channel, which I will link in the description below, from Homine K1. Who talks about how you can design a Brazilian favela, and I've taken a lot of inspiration from that, so full credit to him for producing that video because it was incredibly helpful when coming to design this favela here. So that feels a little bit better. Let's also go ahead and remove the trees from the area that we're going to be wanting to build in here because yeah, they're going to get in the way. And we actually want to pack buildings in super tight and close together, so having trees here is not the most appropriate thing. Probably won't be many trees in and amongst the housing, definitely surrounding it, keep that jungle coming in around it. Yeah, this is the type of area that we've got to work with. The terrain is very steep for building residential on, but it's going to be fun. So how we are going to design this. So I have actually gone through and set up a tag. I've called it Favelas within my residential assets here. And most of them are going to be this Mexican low-rise residential housing pack. Again, you can find it in the asset list linked in the description below. We've also got some of the half-constructed Barrio Latino housing as well that we used in the first episode of Solitude. We used a couple of them there. And then again, some more Mexican residential that we'll bring into this too. But generally speaking, all of the buildings that I've selected like don't have huge like gated front yards like some of the other fancy Brazilian housing. A lot of them have graffiti on it already. We'll probably add a little bit more just to rough it up a tiny bit. But lots of brick, lots of concrete, lots of metal roofs is what we're going for here. It's very hard to pick the assets for this. Like some of these, like that one's probably a little bit too fancy for a favela. It's very hard to pick the assets here because, yeah, you kind of want really, really tiny, almost like 1x2, 1x1 assets almost, but there's very few of those actually available in the workshop. So I think these are the best pick, and these are the ones that we're going to use for this. So the general idea is, let's just focus on this area here. What we want to do is select assets like this with fairly flat top roofs, which a lot of them, thankfully, actually have already. And we're going to start using Move It to build up the layers and height around it. So I'm actually just going to pop a few over here. We'll use this one as well. And it's going to be an awful lot of Move It. I'll warn you in advance to get these all into place. But what we want to do is kind of line them up like this. Let's not use the extra fancy one there. And then we'll get buildings. And we're going to use Page Up with Move It. And we're going to just literally layer them on top of each other. So we're going to have to be really, really careful with spawn points when we do this as well to make sure that spawn points aren't blocked. But this is the general idea, is that we're just going to keep layering these buildings on top of each other. Because again, looking at Rio de Janeiro, like it's hugely layered. Like it just looks like buildings on top of each other, piled up, going up the hillside. And a complete different mix in the building styles. Like nothing really looks too similar at all. So that is absolutely what we're going to be going for here. And choosing assets is going to be pretty important for this. Like here, this one's got a sort of door out onto what could be a balcony. So we want to make sure that that makes sense with the asset that we're putting it on top of. And you can start to get to a point where it's sunk down too low. Like, yeah, we need to make sure any of these open garages on the bottom floor make sense. So we haven't got a concrete wall immediately in front of them. That sort of thing. But that is the general principle. Now, obviously, this is going to take me quite a long time, so I am going to go ahead and do exactly this over and over with some small, very narrow concrete streets in and amongst it. And then we'll come back, once we've got all of these housing in, to talk about the design around it and what's going to be pieced in together around this favela. So I won't lie, this actually took hours of real life gameplay to get all of these buildings in, but I think it looks pretty awesome, to be honest. Yeah, these streets were an absolute nightmare, trying to make sure that we had enough room for parked cars, which I did want because I think it kind of adds into that packed in feel. Making sure that we didn't have bumpy nodes because some of these roads are super steep, and then making sure when all of these buildings were in that they were street level as well was an absolute nightmare. Because of course what I did do was put together a couple of blocks of it and then copy and paste it to some other areas. But by doing that, the terrain isn't the same slopes, all of the buildings were just all over the place. So it took me absolutely hours to go ahead and fix that. But yeah, I think the results are really, really nice here. Like, there's some dodgy bits, doors floating in midair. We're going to look past a couple of odd details. Actually, this building can definitely be fixed. Just so many assets in this, I didn't know what to do with myself. Yeah, we can bring that door back down to street level there. But yeah, it's in, and it's quite large. And what I really like about it actually as well is mixing in some of these smaller buildings with some of these huge red brick ones. And just give little pops in height every now and then with the big platforms on it. Yeah, really, really pleased with actually how it's come out. So what I do want to turn my attention a little bit to now is the surrounding area here. Now if we take a little trip to Google Earth, we are here in Rio de Janeiro, and just looking at this favela on the hillside here and what surrounds it, we've got things like, I mean, Google Earth's looking a little bit dodgy. We have got football pitches around it, so I would like to bring in some of that. Then it does go down into these big, like, terraced houses around it. A little bit of commercial, I think, is needed here as well. But there's lots of trees as well to note. So you'll see in the favela there's very little green. Obviously the houses are really, really packed in. Unfortunately we can't obviously use Google Earth to go and view inside the favela. You can see the sort of extent of the streets up here. Like, there really are no roads going through it, which is almost impossible to do in Cities Skylines. Like, we've obviously got some looping through it. But no trees in there. But then it goes very green actually when you get down here. So we can go and take a little quick look at street view. We go down to this endpoint here. This is quite a nice view up to the edge of the favela. It's sort of the only view I can really get of it. You can see there the houses like tilting over. These extreme terrain changes is yeah, really fascinating. Then you come down onto these tree-lined streets down here. It's actually like cobblestone. It always looks quite nice. But then you turn a corner and this is the type of detailing we're going to be doing in a little bit. We've got graffiti, rubbish. Actually, yeah, there's a couple of people just chilling out on a sofa here as well. I like this, skips. This is the kind of thing that we're going to be putting in and around the favela, and this obviously goes up into it up there. But then, yeah, we have these kind of wall-to-wall, slightly nicer looking housing. Still lots of rubbish on the streets. Power lines as well is something that we could definitely bring into here. We need to obviously bear in mind that we're not in a massive part of the built-up city out here, so I think we'll go a little bit more rural than what we saw, because we're going into luxury villas there, a farm over here, so it's not going to be super packed in. But we do want some of those nicer houses surrounding it. So let's start off first of all by looking at the football field, and I think I just have to use this. It probably looks a bit fancier than what would necessarily be in this area. I think we can rough it up a little bit with some decals. So if we place this in like this, I'm just going to drop the level down a little bit so it's not making the terrain too extreme this side as well, because we'll come back to that in a minute. I don't mind a bit of steep path down to it, although that's probably a bit too much now. Let's raise that up a little bit. Yeah, I like the drop off behind it. I think we can work with that. Like I said, I think we can add decals to this to make it a little bit extra special. So if we go to dirt decals, I've got the one that we use quite a lot. So we can't actually place the decals on top of the football field, which is slightly annoying here, but what we can do is place it around it, which I think gives it a slightly more worn down, rough look. I'm just thinking, did we place this one? We did place it in here. I think it's going to be too much of a concern if we bob off those trees. Eastern cottonwoods. We just remove those. Yeah, I think we're still okay there. Because yeah, I don't really want those around it. I want to bring in some more kind of heavy undergrowth rainforest, which will obviously bring in really close around the favela edges as well. Maybe just need to connect up this path here. So let's grab that. It still seems to be connected into the road. We can do that and then they can get out to the football pitch that side. Yeah, I think we can work with that. And then in here, what I would like to do is add in some commercial. So if we go into our commercial assets, I have got a few like little Brazilian emporiums here with plastic chairs, little cafe, which I quite like. So I think we'll mix in some of those. And then we've got the other style of shops that we have used throughout here, which I think would be quite appropriate for this area. There's some other kind of buildings that look very, yeah, nondescript. So I think they would go quite well with this. What we want to do now is arrange these in quite a nice kind of circle. I want them a little bit further away from the pavement. I want a bit of breathing room in between it. We need to make sure that we're not putting buildings in the cafe chairs here, so these need to be lined up really nicely. And we can start to sort of bend it round a little bit this way with this slightly larger building. And then just to continue to bring in a bit more of this, like I don't mind a bit of industrial looking commercial here too. Again, I think it sort of goes with the vibe that we're going for in this area. I think we can go for this kind of shop too. It sort of matches the colours and the brighter colours that we've got in the favela. Maybe something like this one, which just have the parking out front. And we just want to try and arrange these in a nice pattern so it feels like it makes sense for this area. Again, just make sure it's slightly further away from the street than ordinarily would be. Not sure about this one on the corner because the parking spaces. I think it needs to be on flatter ground there. So let's switch these over. And yeah, that is sitting in much better for me. So yeah, I kind of like how that's forming together, and we'll create a bit of a concrete kind of commercial detailing yard behind that too. Okay, so then let's grab our roads. And I think what I will use actually is the road that we have been using in the favela, which is just like a plain concrete road, but it's not as sort of asphalty as the one that we have used elsewhere in Solitude. So we're just going to bring this out of here, and I want this to kind of like hug the edge of the football pitch because I want housing all around this area. And we'll turn on angle snap. We'll get a curve in here and potentially bring it up to join this road. That is again going to be a very, very steep road, but we'll see if we can manage with that. We just want to kind of continue to bring out some residential patterns around here, but the assets that I'm looking at using for this are some of these sort of slightly nicer looking but very compact Brazilian homes. I think they might be Cuba actually. It'll be up, yeah, these are the Brazil ones. I think we can bring in quite a few rows of these around here. And that will sit in really nicely, I think, in a kind of complementary fashion to our favela. So we'll just want to continue this pattern on all the way up this road. Of course, bringing in trees like we saw as well would be quite important for this too. But the good thing with these is a lot of them are 1x1s, which sit in really nicely up slopes, like much easier to get very narrow buildings up slopes and have them looking like they make sense. So we can kind of continue this pattern on round here. But I do also need to consider emergency services and education. Now, there's of course absolutely nothing around here. And with education in Solitude, I'm actually quite keen to make sure that not everybody is highly educated. So I don't want to make sure that this is actually in the green for all of our education needs. So I'm quite happy with where it's sitting actually at the moment. So we've got a fairly even split amongst all of our education levels here. And I don't know how we've got highly educated because we don't actually have a university in, but so somehow we do. They're very smart in Solitude, self-taught. But I'm quite happy with this. I'm actually not going to put in a school around here. And if they want to travel to school, obviously the high school's there and there's primary schools there. So it's not too far away. Like they're just going to go over that bridge this side. So I think we're okay with schooling wise. I definitely want to bring in some police facilities into here though. So what I am thinking for that is probably the small police station that we've used elsewhere. So if we plop in one of these, let's get rid of the whiteness here. We'll of course create a nice police yard in front of it for this space. And fire as well. I think we'll do the same thing. And we'll just bring in a small firehouse. I think maybe not that one. Let's go for the red brick one because it kind of goes with the brick that we've got in a lot of the favela area. And we'll again just bring those out onto their own road here. So let's grab our concrete connector road. In fact, actually, I might just continue to use this one because I really like this plain unmarked road that we've got here. Might be my new favourite. It does leave some slightly weird marks on the main roads, but I think we can kind of get over that a little bit. But let's make sure that this is all the same height here because that is going to look a bit dodgy otherwise if we concrete this out. We can create a nice area out of that, and I definitely do want medical in here too. Now, I have actually got this Brazilian pharmacy asset, which I'd really like to incorporate. So actually that would probably be good up in the commercial area here. And this acts as medical. So I think that will be quite a nice little thing to have. And of course, this being Brazil, I do also have this Brazilian church, which is a unique building, which I would quite like to bring into the bottom of the favela here. So I think we can have this alongside some of our ploppable graveyards, just so we can support death needs, but also bring in this really nice Brazilian looking church asset too. So again, lots of detailing to put in around that, but I think we can make that sit in pretty nicely at the bottom of the favela here. So this was a pretty tough build for me, quite unique. I've never been to South America, I've never seen a favela like this, so I did do quite a lot of research and I hope the vibe is kind of pulled off. I think it fits quite nicely into Solitude. A very unique build indeed. And you will see at the end there, I did bring in a bus line which takes them from the centre of Serenity down through the Bradley Stantonville and up to the favela, which needs a name. So I would love to hear your name suggestions for this whole area. So please drop them into the comments below. But it's given us a massive residential boost as well, so we've no longer got the worker demand issues. We've got a couple of commercial that needs a few workers, but the demand now on RCI is pretty well balanced, so we're pretty open to what we can build next. But that is going to be all from me for today, so if you have enjoyed the video, likes, comments and shares are greatly appreciated. But that is it from me for now, so thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you again next time. Bye bye!